Heart disease is still the leading cause of death for adults over 65 in this country, and one of the most overlooked levers in that risk sits on the breakfast table every single morning, often disguised as something perfectly ordinary, even something marketed as healthy. This isn't about one dramatic meal. It's about 6 specific, everyday breakfast choices that, eaten regularly over years, place a real, measurable strain on aging arteries. And the most surprising one on this list is very often sitting in a glass most people assume is the healthiest thing on the table. This isn't a fitness channel or a diet channel. What we do here is explain the why behind what's happening inside your body in plain language, backed by real research, so you leave understanding your own arteries instead of just crossing foods off a list you don't fully trust. Here's the promise for today. 6 breakfast foods, the actual mechanism behind each one's effect on your heart, and what the research really shows, not what sounds scary in a headline. Quick note before we start. This video is for general education, not medical advice, and I'm not your doctor. Nothing here is a diagnosis or a prescription, and nothing here should replace medication your doctor has already put you on. For blood pressure, cholesterol, or heart disease, always talk with your own doctor before making a significant change to your diet, especially if you're already managing a heart condition. Stay with me to number 1, because it's the one almost nobody suspects, the food most people reach for specifically because they think it's the healthy choice at breakfast, and the research on it tells a genuinely different story. Before we get into it, tell me in the comments, what does your typical breakfast usually look like? I read these and it shapes what I cover in future videos. Here's what almost no one sits down and explains clearly. Your heart doesn't get damaged by one bad breakfast. What actually happens meal after meal, year after year, is smaller and quieter. A gradual rise in blood pressure from excess sodium, a steady climb in triglycerides from sugar and refined starch, and a slow stiffening of blood vessel walls from certain fats, each one nudging your cardiovascular system slightly further from where it was in your 40s. Think of your arteries like a set of pipes that were smooth and flexible when they were new. Each of these 6 foods, eaten as an everyday habit rather than an occasional treat, contributes its own small amount of scale and pressure to those pipes over time. None of them causes a heart attack on its own. All 6, eaten as a daily pattern for years, is a genuinely different story. And that's the story we're unpacking today. Let's start with number 6. Number 6 is Sugary Cold Cereal. Here's the mechanism. Many popular breakfast cereals carry 10 to 15 grams of added sugar per serving, and eaten alongside skim milk with essentially no fat or fiber to slow digestion. That sugar hits your bloodstream fast, spiking blood glucose and insulin first thing in the morning, day after day. A major analysis published in JAMA Internal Medicine using National Health Survey data on more than 11,000 American adults found that people who got 25% or more of their daily calories from added sugar had roughly triple the risk of cardiovascular disease death compared with people who kept added sugar under 10% of calories. And even at the more moderate range of 10 to 25% of calories, which describes a large share of typical American diets, the risk was still about 30% higher. Picture your bloodstream like a calm river. A fast dose of sugar on an empty stomach is like dropping a boulder in the current, spikes suddenly, then has to work hard to settle back down. And that daily spike and full crash pattern is part of what strains blood vessel linings over years, independent of whether it ever shows up as diabetes. Researchers tracking this same NHANES-linked cohort found the added sugar effect held even after adjusting for overall diet quality, meaning it wasn't simply a marker for an otherwise poor diet. The sugar itself carried an independent signal. The fix here isn't necessarily cutting cereal entirely. It's checking the label for under 5 grams of added sugar per serving, choosing a brand or whole grain option where the first ingredient is an actual grain rather than sugar, and pairing whatever you choose with a source of protein or fiber, like nuts or plain yogurt. To slow that spike down, Number 5 moves from what's in the bowl to what's on the plate next to it. Number 5 is white toast, bagels, and other refined white breads. The mechanism here runs through something called glycemic load, a measure of how fast and how high a food raises your blood sugar. White bread ranks close to the very top of the glycemic index scale, close to pure table sugar itself, because refining strips away the fiber-rich outer layer of the grain that would otherwise slow digestion down. A landmark study following over 72,000 women for a decade, published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, found that those eating the highest glycemic load diets had nearly double the risk of coronary heart disease, compared with those eating the lowest, even after accounting for other heart disease risk factors. And the researchers noted this pattern was strongest in people who were already carrying extra weight. Here's why. Repeated high glycemic spikes push your liver to produce more triglycerides, a type of blood fat, while simultaneously lowering your protective HDL cholesterol, a combination that steadily worsens your overall lipid profile. Swapping to a slower digesting option, a real whole grain bread where you can actually see the grain, or steel-cut oats instead of instant blunts that spike substantially without asking you to give up bread altogether. A simple test at the grocery store. If you can compress a slice of whole wheat bread into a small, dense ball in your hand, it's likely refined flour dyed brown rather than genuinely whole grain. Since real whole grain bread holds a structure, Number 4 combines the same mechanism with a second one working alongside it. Number 4 is pancakes and waffles topped with syrup. This one doubles up on the previous mechanism rather than introducing a new one. The pancake or waffle itself is a refined, high glycemic starch similar to white bread. The syrup adds a concentrated dose of additional sugar directly on top of it. So the blood sugar and triglyceride response researchers describe for high glycemic load diets is essentially compounded, rather than just repeated. A stack of pancakes with a generous pour of syrup can deliver 40 to 60 grams of rapidly absorbed carbohydrate in a single sitting, more than some people's recommended daily added sugar allowance in one breakfast alone. This doesn't mean never having pancakes again. It means treating them the way you treat dessert, as an occasional plate rather than a weekly habit. And when you do have them, adding protein, like eggs, on the side, using a modest drizzle rather than a full pour of syrup, and swapping in oat or whole wheat flour where you can measurably soften the spike without eliminating the meal you enjoy. Number 3 moves away from sugar and into a completely different mechanism, one tied directly to your cholesterol numbers. Number 3 is packaged pastries and donuts, specifically because of trans fat. Here's the mechanism, and it's one of the most well-established in all of cardiovascular research. Trans fats, historically created by partially hydrogenating vegetable oil to extend shelf life, do something no other fat does quite as directly. They raise your LDL, the cholesterol that contributes to artery clogging, plaque, while simultaneously lowering your HDL, the cholesterol that helps clear it away. A double negative shift no other common dietary fat produces to the same degree. The FDA formally banned partially hydrogenated oils from the American food supply in 2018, specifically because of this cardiovascular evidence, which is genuinely good news, but a labeling loophole still allows a product to legally claim 0 grams trans fat if it contains under half a gram per serving, meaning a pastry with several servings worth of hidden partially hydrogenated oil across a package can still add up over a day, and some imported or specialty baked goods haven't. Fully phase it out. The practical check: scan the ingredient list, not just the nutrition label, for the words partially hydrogenated. If you see that phrase anywhere, meaningful, trans fat is present, regardless of what the front label claims, and this applies just as much to non-dairy coffee, creamers, frozen pie crusts, and microwave popcorn as it does to a bakery-cased donut. Number 2 brings us back to sodium, and it's the food most closely tied to a stroke and heart attack risk factor. Almost everyone over 65 is already watching. Number 2 is processed breakfast meats, bacon, sausage, and deli ham. Here's the mechanism. Processed meats contain, on average, roughly 4 times the sodium and about 50% more nitrates and nitrites than the same weight of unprocessed red meat, additives used specifically for curing, color, and shelf life. A large European cohort study following over 448,000 participants across 10 countries found that processed meat intake was associated with a 30% higher rate of cardiovascular disease per 50 grams eaten daily, roughly 2 strips of bacon, a relationship researchers largely attribute to the sodium's effect on blood pressure and the nitrates' effect on the delicate lining of blood vessels called the endothelium. A more recent study of over 106,000 adults specifically linked nitrite additives, sodium nitrite in particular, to a 19% higher risk of developing hypertension. Think of your endothelium as a smooth, non-stick coating lining every blood vessel in your body. Nitrite exposure appears to interfere with that coating's ability to keep blood flowing smoothly, sensitizing vessels to the kind of injury that starts atherosclerosis. This doesn't mean bacon is never allowed again. It means treating it as an occasional flavor addition rather than a daily protein source, choosing nitrate-free or lower sodium versions when you do have it, and pairing it with potassium-rich foods like fruit, which helps your body balance out some of the sodium load. The dose genuinely matters here more than the presence of any bacon at all. 2 strips occasionally is a very different exposure than a few strips every single morning for years. And now, the one I asked you to wait for. Number 1 is fruit juice. Even the kind labeled 100% juice with no added sugar, which is exactly why this one catches so many people off guard. Here's the mechanism. Juicing an orange, an apple, or any fruit strips away nearly all of the fiber that would normally slow sugar absorption in your gut, while concentrating the natural sugar from several pieces of fruit into a single glass. An 8-ounce glass of orange juice contains roughly the same total sugar as a can of regular soda, delivered just as quickly into your bloodstream, even though it started from something genuinely healthy. This connects to the same glycemic load and added sugar mechanisms we've already covered, but it deserves its own spot on this list because it's the one item people reach for, specifically believing it's the heart-healthy choice. When metabolically, a large glass of juice behaves far more like a sugary drink than like the whole fruit it came from. Researchers studying sugar-sweetened beverages, including juice, have found regular consumption is independently associated with higher cardiovascular disease incidence separate from other dietary factors. The fix here is genuinely simple and doesn't require giving up fruit. Eat the whole orange or apple instead of drinking its juice. Fiber intact. Or, if you do want juice, keep the serving to 4 ounces rather than a full glass. Treat it more like a splash of flavor than a beverage and pair it with protein rather than drinking it alone on an empty stomach. If you already have diabetes or prediabetes, this swap matters even more, since juice is one of the fastest ways to spike blood sugar in the entire breakfast lineup, whole fruit included. So here's why all 6 of these actually work, and why they belong on the same list even though they look so different on a plate. Every one of them, through a different specific pathway, either raises the pressure your blood vessels are working under, spikes the blood sugar and triglycerides your liver has to process, or directly shifts your cholesterol balance in the wrong direction. And doing any combination of those as a daily pattern rather than an occasional exception is what compounds into real cardiovascular risk over years. Not any single breakfast. None of this means fear food, and none of it means these 6 items are never allowed again. If tonight you want one simple place to start, pick whichever one of these 6 is currently your daily habit rather than an occasional treat, and swap it for its whole food alternative. Whole fruit instead of juice. Whole grain toast instead of white. A smaller portion of the processed meat alongside eggs instead of as the main event. And if you're already managing high blood pressure, high cholesterol, or heart disease, please bring this list to your own doctor or dietitian rather than overhauling your diet entirely on your own, since your personal targets, how much sodium, how much saturated fat, how tight your blood sugar control needs to be, may be more specific than anything a general video like this one can responsibly offer. Small, sustained swaps, kept up for months and years, are what the research actually reflects, not a single perfect morning. If this helped you look at your own breakfast table a little differently, type the number 6 in the comments. It helps us reach more people asking the same questions about their own morning routine. And tell me, which of these 6 was the biggest surprise for you? And there's one more piece of this puzzle we haven't covered yet, the specific breakfast timing pattern that researchers have linked to heart health independent of what's actually on the plate. And it has nothing to do with what you eat at all. That's what we're covering next.